eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Laddick, and I'm your host from Open LMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in EdTech, spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And Open LMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver effective, customized, and engaging learning experiences for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eLearn podcast. I am excited to have everyone here again on another Tuesday. Well, at least it's Tuesday while we're recording this live. So if you're listening to the recording, I hope that it's a wonderful day for you as well. But of course, as I like to remind everyone, this podcast is not about me. It's about my wonderful guest today, Peace Bransberger. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Where do we find you sitting in the world?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado right now. I'm in my office, actually, so not working from home today. Boulder is a little bit north of Denver, and I live down by Denver. So I've commuted up to hopefully have a seamless talk with you all.
Nice. Well, as someone, I'm lucky enough to be a Coloradoan myself. And, I have been lucky enough also to live around the world, and Boulder seems to be one of those places that everyone knows about. I don't know. It's magical in that way, I guess. Do you find that too?
I certainly hear that people know about it, which I find is interesting because, Denver, Denver's here too. But yeah, it is magical.
Fantastic. Well, Peace, I'd love for you to give you the opportunity to sort of introduce yourself, like the organization that you work for. I'm not sure many people know about this particular organization, but then also the work and the research that you do before we start talking about something that I find incredibly interesting, which is, removing friction from learners. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Okay. And I just want to also say it's always nice to personalize so you know who's coming at you. So my name, of course, it is Peace. And a lot of people ask me that, but there you go. That's who I am. And I work with the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. Our acronym is WICHE. And we are a quasi-governmental nonprofit organization, one of 4 that exist in the country. And they were authorized by the Higher Education Act to be, we are for the Western U.S. states and out into the Pacific territories, as a matter of fact. We're one of these 4 organizations that is meant to help collaborate between the state's public higher education systems. So go across state lines, really help look at different topics that are common across the states, support public universities and colleges and the systems and legislatures that run them through a variety of different types of data research, policy research. We also run a student exchange or tuition discount program for residents of the 15 Western states and then out into the Pacific territories, in addition to a number of different things. So it's sort of to transcend the very different environments that many colleges and universities exist within in a given state, and try to help achieve more successful outcomes, look for commonalities across these different environments, and maybe even achieve greater scale.
Wow. I mean, my mind is already racing with just the diversity of systems within those 15 states. I mean, you're sitting in Colorado, but then I think Wyoming, then I think California, then I think Washington, and then you go all the way out to Hawaii. It's like, man, like the totally different approaches to education. Do you find that it's really that kind of like diverse smorgasbord, or is it more alike than not, and it's more tweaks?
Well, I don't know that every institution, every college or university really in each of those themselves, which is more granular than the number of municipalities and states that we represent. So you have more than 15 varieties, if you will. We have themes. If you experience themes, and so for example, differences across more rural or urban sorts of settings for colleges and universities. Colleges in states with great land masses and how they're distributed so far and wide, and where they're located relative to the individuals who would access their higher education and training. That type of thing determines things as much as states' legislative or other type of environment, which then has a lot of nuances. In higher education, how public institutions are funded through their state legislatures and appropriations, and then tuition setting, all of that, the actual governance of institutions. The reasons for variation are much more varied even than just the number of states and the
100%
where they lie within such a large region. And, compared perhaps to what might be different or similar out in the Northeast or in the Midwest. There are certainly a lot of commonalities. And, even for what we'll speak about today is I wouldn't want anyone to be so bogged down that whatever I hear doesn't apply to me, because at the end of the day, learners and workers who are seeking higher education, those individuals have a lot in common, aside from the settings that they might seek it in.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, I love the richness and the complexity. It's something that I think is going to be an important part of our conversation here, because that smorgasbord, that myriad of options and different variables and whatnot, really, I think it lends itself to our conversation. We're here to talk about, I guess it's one lever, right? It's the lever of a common practice of institutions in higher education placing holds on learners' accounts, essentially, so they can't either register for classes or complete classes or get a certificate or get a degree because of, payments or because of missed classes or, whatever, so they've put a hold on your account as a way to enforce policies. And one of the things we're going to talk about is your proposition or your hypothesis is, look, if we maybe think about this differently, or we take different approaches to this, we can achieve both institutional goals and learner outcomes at the same time. Have I characterized that correctly?
Yeah, I would actually say it's beyond a proposition, though. It's WICHE is out there trying to get some attention on a topic that we've recently worked on, and we did that in collaboration with 12 of our public colleges and universities. And there'll be a link in the chat to find the main webpage that houses a lot of what I'll speak about. So it's more than a proposition that there are some processes and some mechanisms that could be improved. It's the result, what someone would see if they went and visited the website, which includes some video content that really helps, we hope, to paint the picture on this topic, like a bureaucratic procedure. Whoa, sexy. Yeah. But these are little things that are, kind of like our health insurance administration, not so sexy, super important. Or similarly, your credit card billing, not so exciting, but really, really important. So if you go to the webpage, it helps to begin to encapsulate, just what are we talking about? So there's some live, there's recordings of some live testimonial that we've heard from both colleges and institutions that we did work with. And also even just a real earful of some brave and honest explanation about how this impacts students from students themselves. So I really hope people will go take a look. If you hear anything that interests you, dive into one of these recordings that are up there, because I think it really summarizes the heart of the matter. So not just a proposition that we think there's room for improvement and that improvement is possible, but actually having worked with 12 public colleges and universities ranging in size, all the way up to, upwards of 60,000 students per year to, several thousand undergraduates over the course of about a year and a half. So this was in mid 2022 to October of last year, 2023. These colleges and universities bravely, and honestly, a somewhat relatively short time frame for the type of work they did, they bravely dug in, said, hey, we're ready, we're positioned, we understand that this administrative tactic that they do, which is limiting students' access to register for classes or get some records or services at a given point in time to kind of prompt the student to do something, we realize that there's room for improvement. We want to dig into our data. We want to go big, go big or go home, basically. And they sort of said, okay, so the one thing they needed some help with is that 12 colleges and universities, different variety of context as we've described, different technological systems for managing these processes and these data that they have to hold secure with their students. And so across all of that, they were like, can we come together, learn from each other? Witchy, my organization, collaborated with another organization to support these colleges and universities. That organization their acronym is ACRO, American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers. And so ACRO, about a year before, had released some findings on the topic of how impacted students, sort of the scope of the use of this practice and potential impacts for students, the benefits and the perspective of colleges. So they had already done a little bit of work prior to our year and a half work together. And they had obtained data from a number of their member institutions and done the analysis for them and revealed some things. There's a lot of different reasons why that, kind of getting data to research and then putting some information out, it has its benefits and it has its limits. But these 12 institutions we worked with, they were like, we want to do that ourselves. We want to set up a model for being able to look now at these processes and then what's happening with the students who are on the receiving end of them. We want to know we want to look and dive deep now. We want to, not be stumped by any kind of data sharing issues or anything like that. We want to embed this kind of work of using the information from our technological systems to see how well things are working or not and improve it. So that is native, not a small thing. If a college or university is sitting on this right now, they could all kind of like raise a hand and say that sometimes getting the information you need at your fingertips, it's a big, heavy lift. A lot of times, all of your effort is spent doing that, and maybe you don't get as far as improvement. So these colleges and universities, they dove in, they found findings, each one of them, some things in common across their institutions, other things that were really specific to their own environment. So they could just, everything was contextualized. It wasn't a sort of something that the leadership at their institution couldn't buy into because it was someone else's example. It was their own data revealing some patterns. And then they used the time that we were together and as a community of practice to share, what are you doing on this? What have you found? What would you do differently? How can you do something differently? Because first you reveal and then you revise. Right. And the revising at any organization, large or small, is not something that we sit in our offices and just dream up ourselves and then make happen. The scope of trying to improve a pretty common practice that just about every department in a university or college might have a hand in doing for their own reasons. To do that across the institution, it takes effort, it takes common goals, goal setting, and collaboration and stuff. So these institutions excitedly move beyond proposition to actually action. And if you want to ask some questions, I could give you some examples that might
for sure.
say what it looks like.
That's it. So first, I think it'd be helpful for most of us if we could back up for a minute and see. So like what are some of the rationales that colleges use these? I mean, they may seem obvious, like, hey, you didn't pay us, so we can't give you your, degree until you pay it, that kind of thing, or you can't register for classes until, your account balance. But give me a broader, a broader conversation around why colleges choose to use the administrative hold as a policy tool.
Yeah. Okay. So I think people really get, the comparison for getting payments. Because you get tickled to get paid all the time.
Sure, of course.
So institutions are restricting a student's access to register or to receive official transcript of their grades and coursework at points in time when there needs to be attention to the payment schedule, or making a payment or anything related. A lot of the payment transactions relate as well to financial aid. So maybe there's actually payments are flowing and stuff like that, but they have something that they need to do or communicate with students about the financial aid that supports those payments. There's also a very, very common reason for which students are limited in readiness or the ability to go in and register for classes for the next upcoming term is because both for student success from an academic perspective, but also for actual compliance with many financial aid rules and other sorts of things, students need to get advising. And what advising, it categorizes a lot of different things, but obviously it's some advising for success in your academic program. In other cases, it can be so that students are making the required progress to be considered eligible for financial aid, or any number of sort of required progress checkpoints. And so holds, probably peeling back a layer, especially on this topic as one example, it's important to note that computerized systems, for the most part, we didn't hear from anyone who wasn't using a computerized system to do this.
So you're saying basically that sometimes the process is because of automations within a system or something like that, where it just says, hey, this box didn't get checked, therefore that
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
100%. It's automated for the most part. And so various staff are given authority to say, number one, at a minimum, use these automated systems to communicate to a student. So hopefully the first point of contact is a neutral communication that a student could receive that you need to do something. And then if you do not do it, an automated process would restrict your access here. Now, that's really what's happening, right? Is an attempt to communicate to students and then also to sort of have this hard stopping point. Well, okay, something didn't happen. Automated systems able to detect that. And so therefore you cannot proceed just yet. So I just want to tease that out because this notion of communication will become really important. But I want to give you a couple more, examples of why are these things used. Okay, so students come in and they might have documentation missing for their actual admission. And that could mean they're not going to, they don't want their, at least controlled and making progress into registering. In other cases, there's, we just passed a big period where this was applicable, immunization requirements. Health center, insurance sorts of requirements. Not only is it tuition for payments, but you've got payments for the parking passes, for the housing, for cafeteria plans.
Food services. Yeah, there's everything.
Bookstore, for printing services. We also, when an institution goes in and sees what are these automated communications and holds, for what purposes are they? It really reveals that it's just about everything.
Wow.
And any given student, you've got Title IX training, some advising for assessments that are required. Athletes have certain requirements. I really strongly encourage institutions to just look at what is automated, what are students experiencing as potentially a communication, and then potentially ultimately something that restricts their access to registration or records or services. Because you will, as these institutions did, you'll find you don't know what you don't know. And
Right.
then it can be a really nice first step to say, oh, I get why that might be a lot more than we thought it was. And we've got an accumulation of things that might be missing the mark at the end of the day. Because the idea here is communicate with students in this, collaborative exercise of giving them the service they're requesting and paying for, helping them to make their way through that, communicating how to do that, but really, trying not to do it in a way that you're getting in their way. And
Sure, of course.
at the end of the day, if you get in the way of inadvertently, but if it just ends up somehow getting in the way of a student, an institution could lose that student.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you've got the moral rationale that they're there to educate the student and do their best to support that with the student's own contribution to their education. But if you lose a quote unquote consumer, in more consumer terms and stuff, that's one less customer who's able to contribute to your financial bottom line. So it can be a win-win, a lose-lose situation on something like this, as with most things. So I really, what we found is it's not just a proposition. Unless you've recently and regularly done some sort of audit on these automations that are part of managing so much of the entire enterprise, there is a strong possibility that they may be landing in a way that has resulted in impediments or at least less than ideal sort of transactions.
I'd love to take the opportunity. I see a bunch of people over on X right now, formerly known as Twitter, and I see some people in LinkedIn as well. This is a live conversation right now. So if you do have questions for Peace, or, you'd like to comment about maybe how your institution works through some of these administrative hold situations or some of the systems that you use, love to hear from you. Just throw it in there, and we'll be happy to respond or talk about that. As you've now started to peel the onion piece on this particular topic, I admit I didn't realize what I was getting into in this conversation, because I was thinking it was going to be more of a policy conversation. But man, when I think of everything from you didn't return a library book to your financial aid package needs you to check this one box on Form C, any of those things in between could ultimately impede my ability, as you said, to register for classes or get a transcript or take a next step somewhere. There's a lot of boxes in there. When I think across, a standard, suite of technology to any higher education institution, where do you begin peeling the onion on this in terms of helping an institution understand this? Is there a particular audit process that you go through? Is there something that you discovered when you were working with your 12 schools? As you said, it was kind of a privilege for them to say, look, we're prepared to dig into this. Like, I'd love to know, what does that look like? What is like timing, resource allocation, kind of level of commitment, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. What I can say is, and of course it's going to vary, and there are institutions that have lesser resources to do this sort of thing. And so I'll give a couple examples that are that say it can be done.
Mm-hmm. Sure, of course, yeah.
So first things first, on the website, part of the project was that I mentioned that ACRO, the Registrars Association, had done some work on this before. And then during the project itself, we were able to use like a draft guidebook, a data analysis protocol that they had come up with, doing their own analysis. And we wanted to see, could colleges use it to kind of, on at least some basic indicators, get a sense of how to approach this. So I don't have to be, the academic officer going to my IT or IR, information technology or institutional research department, and saying, hey, I need to research this, period. But I don't have an idea what to do. So there's a guidebook that you can download that actually, is it's targeted for the technological folks to actually go in. We use there are 4 common student information systems represented among the 12 colleges and universities. So we include some kind of like open source code and common field names that are represented by those very, pretty common student information systems. You can go download that you can take and walk into your tech folks and say, can you help us get our arms around this? And so that's a first step to saying we've attempted to reduce that burden and clarify some things. What I will say is each of the institutions did, and were able to do that. And I mean, ranging all the way down to some, lesser resource community colleges and other sorts of settings. So it's possible. And each of them had challenges, no doubt. I like the fact that one institution, and this was a university, they actually went ahead and they had one of their graduate courses undertake a lot of the work for them. So they engaged
that's really
students.
Nice. Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's fantastic from a resource perspective, but wow, what experience did they give to these students? It's learning in action. And also we're talking about the students. So these students were sort of like, we know exactly what you're talking about. We also want to bring to this, not only the data analysis, but a student perspective. So let us go out and do some focus groups. So you could literally go in there. We have one college right now that's, as they continue to look at making improvements, their math faculty are helping with kind of like modeling some information out of the initial data analysis that would help inform what they do next. So there are ways to reduce, to make it more possible. There are ways also to get more authentic contributions to the effort here. As far as how do you start, it's like, does it have to be all encompassing? We would advise that you do that initial kind of data look all encompassing as you possibly can. It's going to give you some real high level kinds of information. After that, you say, hey, I know our student population. Let's just peel it back and go, either look at those that we think could be most negatively impacted by this, so that a given segment that we're most concerned about. Or you can say, why don't we look at the bulk of the students? Then you can start slicing and dicing it by what your context is once you've even just gotten all of the information in one place. So in that way, you can say, I don't have to bite it all off. We would say get prepared to be able to bring all that information in, because you're going to do it once, do it well. And there's some examples for being able to follow, but then really slice and dice that in a way that makes sense. Low-hanging fruit. Yes. I mean, look at what is the most frequently used reason or instance of this sorts of holds things. So one example, and when I mention these examples, again, keep pointing you to the website. We put a lot of effort into it for a reason. We encapsulated both the data that resulted from this, the sort of data findings. But more than that, we wanted to just say, hey, it was 12 institutions. They were represented so many contexts. How do we get out there the idea what's common or not? So we said, let's put stuff out in their own words. So it's the videos, it's the animated content. Throughout everything, we have kind of quoted examples as opposed to trying to come up with empirically evaluated comparable sort of results. I think every institution could go in there and find one thing that resonates with them and say, this is enough to get me moving. So an example on the topic of sort of low-hanging fruit and how do you start making some progress from something that is so multifaceted is being able to identify which of the colleges or departments, academic disciplines might be using advising holds the most frequently, with the greatest frequency per student, with a given pattern that stands aside from other, from a more
I feel like Yeah, I feel like there's a like a call out, like problem here where it's like, oh hey, did you notice that the business school, does holds like 10x more than any other school in the university? Like that kind of thing could happen, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of what we saw. I don't recall exactly which department it was, but the thing I was going to say here is, because again, I really want to keep in mind, this is not a maliciously intended process by enterprises that are just trying to run themselves. But you see which just the facts of the matter. So which department, which college is actually using the greatest frequency, has an anomalous pattern at least. And in conversation with them, bringing to them something they may never have seen, they may have, thought, ooh, we got a design here that really works. But they're not seeing it in action. They're not seeing it. They just sort of see what's in front of you each semester. So this large university brought that to that college, and the dean of that college immediately recognized that something had to change, but it was by virtue of being able to see it, right? Moving. And then in addition to that, it's not to discount what any student or even staff might represent about some of the things that have accumulated over time that could be changed. Like those kind of real life examples are as important when paired with this. But then you also hear the real life perspective of the dean and the faculty and those who have long-term experience with students about how to help them move through the requirements that are necessary so that they, are have made their way, not just, have made their way through a course of study and learn what they need to learn. So major requirements and stuff like that. You bring these different perspectives together, and with those what has been revealed through some hard, cold facts, you can come to a new place. And then see what, another thing that each institution that we worked with kind of took things in their own different way to make progress, as was possible in their environment without being limited, by the perfect. And one institution was like, okay, so we've got maybe this small cohort or group of students who we do something with, because they're in a category of, getting close to academic probation. And what we would usually do is preemptively sort of use these holds to move them through and make sure that they're not proceeding into coursework that they're not ready for or authorized to access. And instead, they were sort of like, it's a small enough cohort, we can do like a little natural experiment. Let's just not be preemptive. Let's wait and see who needs to be restricted at the end of the term.
Right.
And see if it changes the quality of the education that they're all receiving, or the inequality indicators, completion, all that sort of stuff. And basically their little natural experiment with one set of students was a way to pilot the idea of, instead of kind of preemptively restricting some of the course access to registering for courses, they gave them those opportunities, and then it's a retrospective look at who should not be proceeding. And they found that it basically got, the same rate of students were getting to the end of that whole period. But the majority of students who did not really need to be restricted up front got to go through a process of registering and preparing themselves for the next phase in a way that made sense and that didn't stand in their way, and didn't, end up being, I'm already quite concerned about my progress as a student, and I've got a negative feeling from whether I can get in and kind of figure out what I'm going to do next, get the courses set up, and feel that I'm motivated to keep trying. Little, negative experiences like that can really add up. They can add up for the most successful of us. They can.
Sure, really, of course, yeah. So take me to the next level there, where I love this experiment we're talking about, and what it revealed of, shifting where those holes were placed and whatnot's, essentially achieving the quality outcome for the institution of being able to identify someone who still needed something, but also providing a potential better outcome for the learner as well, because as you said, they're able to continue to make progress. Take me to that next level, because you know, about 5 or 10 minutes ago, you wanted to mention the power of communication in this process. And,
Sure.
and as someone who, I mean, I'm a communicator, I'm attaching myself to that because I totally get it. You know, I'm just thinking, you said there's 4 common systems, so I'm guessing that means there's probably 20 that, you know, any one institution uses, and they all come with, like, you know, the default email that you get, and it's like, your account is not paid, your account is not now on hold, you know. And so talk to me about how you've seen through your research tweaks in communication, or maybe a different communication style. You know, it's like, hey, instead of an email, maybe somebody got a phone call, or, you know, instead of one type of language, you know, like truly changing that language, it just changes, you know, it creates a different situation. Let me stop there and let you run with it.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, buckle up.
Love it.
Let's be open to our imperfections, embrace them, keep moving. Okay, so please look at the video, not videotaped. It was a recorded live webcast event that we had back in October. And we have it timestamped so you can like fast forward to when the students start telling us their stuff. And these were some really brave students, because they had college administrators in the room who were going to hear what they really had to say. So on the topic of communication, I mean, the students that were on that panel represented one large urban university here in the Denver area. So not every single one, right? There are some that are doing better or worse, but especially as regards to if you're running a kind of out of the box student information or customer management system, this might be the case. So they described, several of them were student advisors as well as students, and they described how they had to get trained to basically interpret computer codes that would be issued as the messages that students would receive. So I don't mean, I'm not mocking or anything, actually.
No, I'm just,
I'm a tech heavy person, and sometimes I'm not sure I'm speaking real language or if I'm speaking computer code out loud. But they said, and the administrators in the room kind of acknowledged it, is that if we have to train student advisors to interpret the messages that a student might see, or maybe it's the resident dorm advisors or something that might, you know, actually include like little, you know, codes, not code snippets, but, you know, actual codes. It's an MD15 administrative hold or something.
I'm just thinking the analogy to any bill you get from a hospital, or, you know, even like your mobile phone bill, where you're like,
what does it mean?
Why can't I understand this in plain English? There's zero reason in the year 2024, and at least this study was done in 2022, 23, zero reason in the 21st century why we can't be providing information in plain English, or whatever your native language is.
Yeah, so
that's super easily understandable, and I understand what the issue is.
And customized.
Exactly, you know?
Customized. Yeah, customized, not just to the student and everything. And then we saw examples where they had really taken it to a little bit more of a plain language approach. So it's possible. We saw that it's possible. It does take effort. One of the things that will be necessary for most institutions is not only sort of getting a handle on how do you go ahead and start doing that in a more targeted way, utilizing the information systems that you have potentially better, or finding out how are you going to do that, really assessing them and demanding something a little bit more plain English from what you're paying for. But the other thing is that you have to know which staff across the college are kind of applying this checkbox, if you will, the hold. Because if there's no, you know, like if you tell me to write the message, my message might be better or worse than, you know, one of my colleagues across the office if they also get to apply one of these. So getting some sort of handle on who can actually generate and issue these sorts of things, so that yes, they can also be communicated well. You know, the decisions that go into actually authorizing the placement of a hold, let alone the communications that might precede it. So on the topic of communication, part of it is really just stepping back again, keep stepping back and making sure you know where they're coming from. It's not just go in and like, me, myself, and I even gets to mess around with the business colleges holds. They may have to do it themselves, but let's have a way to get all on the same page about that. So the other thing that we, and it ranges. So every single college or university just needs to know what their own process is and then make improvements within that setting. We heard from students, we heard from 50 students at these, across these 12 institutions, and they described, choice words out of the mouths of babes, if you will. And not all of them were babes, ranging all the way up into adult students, working parents, et cetera. But we heard, like I get texts about the events and stuff like that, but I don't actually have texts about these, some of these processes I have to pay attention to. So why aren't you utilizing text for everything? Or a very common way that things are automated is that students have to log into or access things through a portal. And the way they access that portal may or may not be through an app, right? May require you to actually physically log in, not necessarily, have the same level of kind of automated responsiveness that we might get out of, our Twitter app or any other app. So not every institution has, is really representing or able to bring all their systems together and then deliver information in a way that I think more of us have gotten accustomed to in the, in our overall lives. And so students are like, I log into my portal to register for classes. And it's when I register for classes that I see the, 18 messages that say, I'm 5 weeks past a due date and now I can't register for classes. And I'm trying to represent some humor in this, as well as just the seriousness of it, because let me just take that example of how important it is to get this figured out, is that we heard from too many of the students that we actually heard from, keeping in mind it's a small sample, but we heard from too many of them. We didn't load this situation into the interviews we did, that they said the consequence of me not knowing in advance of registration that I needed to do something, even though I would have taken action on it, but it was just that I don't log into my portal otherwise, because I'm otherwise getting communications over here that lead me to believe I'm going to hear from it on my text. The consequence is I log in and it's time to register, and me and the rest of the students are competing for space. Sure. And if I am delayed, and if I don't know if this is the case, but if it's a Friday and I haven't been able to resolve whatever is happening, registration is open, class slots fill up, I'm at the back of the line waiting to go take care of something. There are students who, not every one of them, this is not how it results every time, but are saying, I will register for a class I do not need so that I have the credits I need. And because I've been basically, I'm at the back of the line as a result of some of this. And when you register and attend, you pay. So sure, of course, I want to this is not every single instance, but it's the example of kind of what's at stake for, among other things, for trying to clear this up.
Yeah, and when there's bad actors, great. There's bad actors, but I'm guessing and I'll let the data play out as it is, but in the larger population of any university system or higher ed system, those bad actors are probably a pretty small percentage. Mm-hmm. Whereas I'm very happy for your attempted humor. I'm thinking about the institution that I am an adjunct instructor for, and like that. I mean, I log into the portal twice a year, one, it's an incredibly cumbersome process. And two, it's like, I don't even know where things are, but I don't need it for so many things. So I'm just wondering about a student, like you just described a perfect situation where it's like discovering all of the problems because you weren't getting the communications is the worst way to be communicated about this, right?
I'm not going to say what's the better or worse, but I think I just described a potential negative consequence that that can be, again, I really want to go out there and say it's obviously in the university or college's better benefit to do these things. The improvements can be done, revealing some of the some of what is necessary is the first step, and then each institution finds their pain points and moves forward. As regards to communications, we had one institution who was like, okay, yeah, we totally get it, we buy it. So, like QR codes, we've never used them before. We're going to be using QR codes for how students can access information on this topic. We're going to put them around campus so that this is something, again, these are like administrative things that,
right.
That this is understandable. They shouldn't be taking very much of anyone's time or thought to pay attention to. So, but they need to get them out in front of students and say, we're working on this. We want you to understand better. Using video content to explain it. I don't know if any college or university is on here, goes and looks at a couple of things, these resources we make available are freely available. So you could borrow from one of our videos or something as a way to start introducing the topic to students, to faculty, to administrators about what is important here. What are some of the perspectives? Just use something that's there. You don't even have to drop a big old report on their desk.
Well, take it one more step as well, because I'm just thinking we've spoken with many people on the podcast here and at some of the conferences we've attended and whatnot about, the different levels of access that students have, equity issues, is what I'm thinking about here, where, a student who maybe doesn't have the same kind of access in terms of technology, like device or connection or those kinds of things, we've just put another hurdle or three in front of them as well. Can you unpack that a little bit for me too? Or did your research go down that rabbit
Yes, hole? Definitely. So we were generously supported in this research by the Ascendium Education Group and Lumina Foundation. And some of their interests were in helping to further tease out just reveal what is the facts about the topic in general, but also if there are students who appear to be differently impacted or experiencing them different. Now, I would say that since we all are different, we will experience everything differently, right? But each of the colleges we did the call for applications to be part of the learning project together. We emphasized that the institutions had serve students of racial and ethnic diverse population, and then also we're sort of among those that were serving higher rates of Pell recipient students, so lower income writ large indicators. So we had that as part of the project overall, as wanting to be able to focus on it. And then each of the institutions did analysis from those two perspectives as part of their base analysis. And they also they said, hey, but our student population, what are some other things that are important? We've got a high veteran student population maybe, or we have, our part-time, full-time enrollment, skews heavy towards part-time enrollment, which can often be an intersectional sort of identity for students who might have other, either challenges or needs. And each of them did. And again, rather than, it doesn't make sense for Wyoming Community College to compare itself necessarily to a California university on these topics. So we just had them provide both common results so that we could identify on some pretty basic indicators that while that there are some types of holds that maybe students of a marginalized population or low income population do appear to be actually just experiencing more frequently. Now, that could trend with the fact that they receive financial aid, but they're experiencing them. And then the real question is, are they getting them resolved? Are they moving past the actual hold and into, progress to registration or their transcript? And there was evidence across all the institutions together that there was differential impact for lower income Pell recipient students and some students by their racial or ethnic identity. Nothing that's, I would say, is super surprising, but just a point of evidence.
There's the evidence right there.
Yeah, and then each institution looked at which things were important. I'd say some institutions also looked at this: new students versus returning students, or continuing students. That sometimes evidenced what was happening. In some cases, being able to look at students with higher frequency of receiving a hold and or not having it resolved, not persisting at the same rate into the next term. So really peeling the onion, so to speak, to look at where your biggest impacts appear to be happening with your students.
So I'm always amazed at how quickly time flies on these conversations, but there's one more really important question, and I'm not going to take credit for it. You teed me up for this in our sort of pre-talk in the green room here, and that you wanted to mention that there is a real good reason for universities to be looking at that, and that it relates to something, a federal regulation change that's happening. Can you please just tell us about that so that we have that information?
Yeah, and I'm not the best person to interpret federal regulation, so I'll stay high level and point folks to the fact that if they go to a page on our website that deals with the topic, it's called transcript holds. So the withholding of a course transcript when a student requests it, that has their official posting of grades and courses taken. It's on that topic. If you go there, we have links to the ACRO. ACRO, the Registrars Association, is out on the front of this topic, where has been a regulatory change, federal regulatory change that takes effect now in several months on July 1st of 2024. That institutions must provide the requested transcript to a student who is supported by federal financial aid. Okay. Now, there are nuances in there, and that's where I will go no further to interpret it. There are still questions about, since that is not the totality of every single student. So those students who, under the terms of the regulation, are not considered, the federal aid recipients, or have not met all of the eligibility to be considered, they must receive the transcript. That could, by some estimates, be 40 to 45% of the students wouldn't come up under this regulation. So colleges could, in theory, continue to restrict their access to a transcript if they weren't one of the federal aid recipients that are covered by the regulation. We are hearing, and it's nothing is solidified with actual data, but just as difficult as it is for institutions to get their arms around this whole process of what's going on with the use of holds, it would be difficult for them to differentiate between which students should or should not receive a transcript when they request it. So it's a real evolving situation. ACRO and another organization, NACUBA, which is National Association of College and University Business Officers, are both really on the front lines of this, since their members are right in the middle of the topic, since they administer transcripts and the financial sorts of sides of the house. I'd really point folks to look at that. If this is the first time a college or university is hearing about a federal regulation change that they must comply with by July 1st, then I'd move with haste. It is really, it can be positive for individuals, whether they are currently enrolled students or they were enrolled 30 years ago or last year, and for some reason now need to request a transcript. And this opens an opportunity for them to get that transcript, use the information maybe to transfer somewhere, or maybe for a job that requires the information. It's entirely positive from that perspective. From an institution's perspective, the question is, well, this is one of the mechanisms we've been using to, hold students accountable for owed money, to collect debts, if you will. And, it's kind of like the carrot at the end of the process, if they can get the payment for it. So how it will play out, what institutions will do to continue to follow up on the money that is owed them by students, is that is still within their rights to do. So students may, still have owed balances that are affecting them at the same time that they can request their transcript. It is also the case that typically not only is a student who owes money restricted from getting their record, they're also there's a hold on their registration. So the federal regulations do not restrict registration or restrict a college's use of a registration hold. So there's still some things for students to navigate if they've had a transcript hold. It's positive. There's lots of details, lots of nuances, lots of questions, actually, which ACRO and NCUBRA are trying to manage and communicate with the Federal Department of Education. But something certainly to be aware of. And I would be surprised if the average consumer knows that this happened.
Of
I know
course,
it.
yeah, absolutely.
Because I researched this, but for those who are out there, and it's in a time where college students enrolling in college, the landscape has really changed in the last number of years, but for certain over the last 3 to 4 years, with a propensity for students to enroll, and colleges in some cases not getting the enrollments that they've been used to. It could be in a university or a college's benefit to get the word out about this new change, about access to transcripts for some students, about maybe the potential that they, as a enterprise, are considering and maybe able to work with students in a different way. Yes, you can have your transcript. We'd really love to have you back if you were trying to finish your studies or something. So really could be a win-win again.
Fantastic.
Opportunity from every kind of challenge or change, I would say.
On that note, unfortunately, I have to bring our conversation to an end here, but I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to, really give us a huge amount of detail on what seems like potentially a simple issue, but really being able to reveal the complexities behind this. But one of the things I really, really appreciate is the resources that you shared through Witchy that people can go access, or institutions can go access. The playbook you talked about, the 4 different common systems. You even said, hey, go borrow some of our videos if you want to help communicate this better. I really, really appreciate your time today, Peace, and can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Thanks for giving us a stage. Go do good work.